Okay, we are live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have two very special guests. Nick from the Occult Rejects. If you've watched my show or listened to my show, you've heard him or me as a guest on his show, and he's talked to me. Done shows recently about Crossing the Abyss and the Pilgrim Society, which is getting a little bit of mention. There was mentioned in a guy who I listened to, Alex Craner, mentioned the Pilgrim Society too, who's kind of a mainline online kind of commentator, academic. But it was interesting to hear him talk about it after kind of we did, and the shows I've done with Charlie Robinson. But it was interesting to kind of make it into mainline discourse. And his kind of views are that the ex-English empire is punching over its weight, which I would agree with, and through things like the Pilgrim Society. But also another guest is Teresa, who's done shows with Nick. So this is the first time I think I've had her on my show. But we're going to talk to something I don't really know much about. And Nick reached out to me and said, hey, I've been doing this research on this subject. And so I'm kind of flying blind. Like, I don't really know that much. I know a lot about the Catholic Church. I grew up Catholic. I grew up Roman Catholic. But this is called the St. Gallen Mafia. So it's ST and Gallen, Gallen. I did a little bit of stuff about it. Kind of ties in. It kind of overlaps with some of these old orders that I've been studying. I did a show on the Knights of Malta with Courtney Turner, just like the Pilgrim Society, all these old kind of heraldic orders and things like that. But these guys can talk more about that.
I've actually even wondered if they tie into the P2 lodges somehow.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
A lot of them do. I mean, P2 is a Masonic lodge, but all those guys like Berlusconi was a member of P2, who's the head of the Italian.
Was he really?
Yeah, that's actually how. There's a really good book called, I think it's called The Sack of Rome, and it's about him and how he was able to take over the kind of corporate media in Italy. And it was through non-commercial wholesale loans through his friends in P2. So any negotiation that he had with, somebody, he could undercut and offer a better price because he's getting money from his buddies through P2 much cheaper.
Really That's interesting. Yeah, he's a fascinating character. We'll have to do a show on him sometime. Silvio Berlusconi.
So for people, maybe you guys can talk about what you've been up to and what led you to the subject, St. Gallen Mafia.
Well, real quick, I'll just, believe it or not, this is actually Teresa's topic. But it's the Occult Rejects, and Teresa's one of the people one of the many people that is part of the Occult Rejects. And she had approached me with this topic, and I actually thought it was like really interesting. She was looking to do it for another show, and I was like, "Oh, this is really good." I was like, "We should really use this on the Occult Rejects." And she was like, "Yeah, for sure." And after we got done doing it, kind of like covering it and stuff, I reached out to you, and I was like, "Why not do it on his show, and then we'll just share this for the Occult Rejects?" So it's kind of actually, like I was telling you before, it's I guess a sneak peek. We haven't even released this ourselves, so this is an exclusive on William Ramsey show. So awesome. This isn't even out on our end. But I'm going to turn it over and let Teresa actually get into it because this is her topic. So
sure. Well, he definitely helped a lot. But so the St. Gallen Mafia is essentially not an actual mafia, although the title does sound really cool. When I first heard the term, I was like, what is that? It's so gangster. But yeah, basically
as evil.
Yeah, the other name's the St. Gallen Group, which is not as fun. So we went with St. Gallen Mafia. But essentially, it's a group of high-level cardinals and bishops who've coordinated to push through globalist agendas through the papacy of Pope Francis. And they've sort of been literally conspiring to do this since the early 90s, which is pretty interesting. I first heard the term when I was listening to another podcast, actually. Father Charles Murr, he wrote a book called Murder in the 33rd Degree. I think we're going to refer to the book later. But that book is essentially about the murder of Pope John Paul I and the Freemasonic involvement in that case. And he brought up the term St. Gallen Mafia, and I was like, what is that? And then basically I started researching it, and it led me down a rabbit hole of Catholicism and conspiracy. So it was really interesting, and I just kind of rolled with it, and here we are today. So yeah. But yeah, like I said, it's a group of high-level cardinals. Oh, sorry, go ahead, William.
I was just going to say that death is kind of featured in a fictional way in Godfather 3. So the
that's right. Yes,
He
that's
didn't
right.
last very
Yes.
long. He lasted like 17 days or something like that.
33 days
33, okay,
to
so
be precise.
17, just as good.
Show 17 would be good. 33 though, to show, maybe who's behind the murder. So we'll see. But yeah, so basically the group, the St. Gallen group, is named after a town in Switzerland, which is called St. Gallen. It started around 95, 96 during the decline of Pope John Paul II in his papacy. And it was this group discussing what they believe would be the best way forward for the Catholic Church and how to push these globalist agendas through the church. They did think that Cardinal Ratzinger, who became Pope Benedict XVI, they believed that he was like the absolute wrong choice for their agenda. So I know a lot of conspiracy around Pope Benedict. People are like, he's so evil.
Yeah, he looks
He's
like a creep.
He looked like a creep, but
does.
maybe
He was in the Hitler Youth, I think, if I remember correctly.
he could have been. But
I think there's a picture of him, but I don't know.
So were some of these guys, apparently. But I think Benedict was more of a traditionalist by comparison to this group, which is extremely liberal in terms of like Catholicism, at least. So they definitely did not want him in, although of course he did, was Pope for a time. But they did push for the election of Jorge Bergoglio from Argentina, who ended up becoming Pope Francis. And there are a couple authors who are really expert on this topic, if anyone wants to dive further. One's name is Julia Maloney. The other one is Taylor Marshall, who a lot of people may be more familiar with. He's quite popular on YouTube. And this is just a quick quote from Taylor Marshall's book Infiltration. It's from an article that he was featured in. So it says, the Catholic Church is in crisis because the enemies of Christ plotted against organized efforts to place a pope for Satan on the Roman chair of St. Peter. It has been a slow, patient plan to establish a satanic revolution with the Pope as puppet. And Marshall himself basically believes without a doubt that this Pope for Satan is Pope Francis. That's very
incredible. Yeah.
Strong statement, right? Yeah.
That's the most important person in Catholicism. So saying he's
yeah.
He's made some interesting decisions. He's pro mRNA shot and things like that. So
certainly, well, learning about the origins of this group may help us understand his papacy a lot better. And I am Catholic still, and it helped me to understand a lot of like what's going on in the church. I'm like, oh, that makes sense now, as opposed to being super confused about it. Basically, the process of infiltration has been by Freemasons and other secret societies. Their allies were recognized by Pope Gregory the 16th. He was a long time ago, and many later popes. Actually, in 1846, there was a Marian apparition. So if people don't know what that is, that's just when like somebody claims to see the Virgin Mary, either like in person or like a locution, which is like a message in their ear, as if like someone was speaking to them. So this apparition of Mary is called Our Lady of La Salette. That was in 1846. And Mary herself spoke of a future time when Rome will lose faith and become the seat of the Antichrist. I think this is what she was maybe talking about. I'm not saying Pope Francis is the Antichrist, but just preparing the way, perhaps. And also around the same time in 1884, Pope Leo XIII had this vision of Satan approaching the throne of God. I think it was like in the middle of a mass or something. And he just like had this sudden vision where he stopped and he was like so disturbed by the whole thing that he saw. I basically saw Satan approach God and say, I want to tempt humanity and lead them astray. And God was like, cool. How much time do you need? Like, go for it. Wow. Yeah, it's a little like playing like Job, like if you're familiar with that story in the Old Testament. Mm-hmm. Very much like Job. And God was like, how much time do you need? And Satan's like, probably 100 years or so. So if that was 1884, that would bring us to 1984. So we're like, we're not too far off the mark from that. It's 41 years ago. So we're pretty close. But yeah, that was his vision, and actually so disturbed by it that's where the St. Michael prayer comes from. St. Michael the Archangel. Pope Leo wrote that prayer after that vision.
Interesting. Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so with the St. Gallen group, that is a more modern kind of infiltration of this whole modernism versus traditionalism thing in the Catholic Church.
Always fighting, right? They've been fighting for
It's
hundreds of years, right?
always warring, and it's just basically that story. So like it's a watering down of the heavy tradition over time, which we can even go back to like 1859. Again, this like mid 1800s, right? 1859, there was a guy named Jacques Crétineau Joly. He was a French philosopher. He published a very important work called The Roman Church in the Face of Revolution. And it was notable because he claimed that anti-Catholic secret societies would no longer attack the church from the outside, but rather infiltrate it from the inside, like within. And this plot is actually detailed in a written document, which is called the Alta Vendita, written by an Italian Freemasonic group that's referred to as the Carbonari, which means, I think, like charcoal or something. Yeah, I think that's what it means.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and the Carbonari had a growing influence in Italy at the time. This was during the like Risorgimento period of history in Italy, where they were forming into like a nation. Prior to that, Italy was not like a formalized country, essentially, like as we know it today. The document, the Alta Vendita, the document's author or authors used the pseudonym Piccolo Tigre, which means little tiger, to basically boldly detail how they planned to infiltrate the clergy and the papacy to propagate Freemasonic ideals and beliefs. The Carbonari was also aligned with other secret societies across Europe, such as Freemasons in France, Spain, Portugal, and Russia. And these lodges shared a hatred for Catholicism and monarchy.
Very nice. And then I'll start to take over a little bit. Here's an excerpt from the document whose official title is The Permanent Instruction of the Alta Vendita. And it stated, the Pope, whoever he may be, will never come to the secret societies. It is for the secret societies to come first to the church with the aim of winning them both. The work which we have undertaken is not the work of a day, nor a month, nor a year. It may last many years, a century perhaps, but in our ranks the soldier dies and the fight continues. Now then, in order to secure us a pope according to our own heart, it is necessary to fashion for that pope a generation worthy of the kingdom of which we dream. Leave on one side old age and middle life, go to the youth, and if possible, even to children. The reputation of a good Catholic and a good patriot will open the way for our doctrine to pass into the hearts of the young clergy and go even to the depths of covens. In a few years, the young clergy will have, by force of events, invaded all offices. They will govern, administer, and judge. They will form the council of the sovereign. They will be called upon to choose the pontiff who will reign, and that pontiff, like the greater part of his contemporaries, will be necessarily imbued with the Italian and humanitarian principles which are about to put into circulation. Do you want to wipe out the last vestige of the tyrants and oppressors? Cast out your nets deep into the sacristy. You know what that means? Sacristy. Yeah.
I think it's like
The seminaries and the monasteries, rather than at the bottom of the sea. And if you do not rush things, we promise you a catch more miraculous than this. The fishermen of fish become a fisherman of men. You too will fish some friends and lead them to the feet of the apostolic sea. Essentially, the document explains how the youth will be corrupted or their ideas changed through the corruption of families, books, poems, colleges, universities, and seminaries to make thought leaders, parents, politicians, priests, and eventually even a pope that embodies Freemasonic values. Long story short.
Yeah, that's just an excerpt from the document. It's not the whole thing. And I think like it's not a coincidence that the Alta Vendita was written around the same time as that infamous letter from Albert Pike to Giuseppe Mazzini, right? Yeah, I think that's interesting timing that this is all seem to be happening around the mid 1800s. Like it's pretty wild. If people aren't familiar with that document, basically Albert Pike, who's famous, well-known 33rd degree Freemason, He was an occultist, a Freemason Grand Master, and also creator of the southern jurisdiction of the Masonic Scottish Rite Order. And Giuseppe Mazzini was the head of the Action Party in Italy. He's a far left politician at the time, and he was very active during the Risorgimento period, calling for the Italian unification of the mid-1800s. Also rumored to be the director of the Illuminati at one point.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, in that document, Albert Pike wrote and outlined the 3 world wars and why they would come to fruition, how it would happen. And I think actually Nick's going to read a little excerpt regarding World War III.
Yes, the Third World War must be fomented by taking advantage of the differences caused by the agentur of the Illuminati between the political Zionists and the leaders of the Islamic world. The war must be conducted in such a way that Islam and political Zionism mutually destroy each other. Meanwhile, the other nations, once more divided on this issue, will be constrained to fight to the point of complete physical, moral, spiritual, and economical exhaustion. We shall unleash the nihilists and the atheists. We shall provoke a formidable social cataclysm, which in all in its horror will show clearly to the nations the effect of absolute atheism, origin of savagery, and the most bloody turmoil. Then everywhere the citizens obliged to defend themselves against the world minority of revolutionaries will exterminate those destroyers of civilization, and the multitude, disillusioned with Christianity, whose deistic spirits will form that moment be without compass or direction and anxious for an ideal, but without knowing where to render its adoration, will receive the true light through the universal manifestation of the pure doctrine of Lucifer, brought finally out in the public view. This manifestation will result from the general reactionary movement, which will follow the destruction of Christianity and atheism, both conquered and exterminated at the same time.
It's pretty interesting, especially like with what's going on right now in the Middle East too. Like we're literally seeing that conflict of Islamic world versus Zionist world, right?
Right. No question about it.
I know it's been going on for quite some time. It's nothing new.
Peaking or something. It's peaking again, I guess.
Yeah, it seems to be peaking. And, of course, rumors of World War III are circulating all the time in the last, year or two, right? So,
yeah, sure. I mean, it feels like the world's on fire if you add up Gaza, Ukraine, Europe, all these movements, migration, and things like that. Open borders and stuff.
Exactly. Yeah, totally. So just wanted to get into a little bit of like what are these Freemasonic values that the St. Gallen Mafia and its precursors wanted to propagate throughout the Catholic Church and throughout the world, essentially. So to answer this question, we're going to go back to the Protestant Reformation of 1517. And this is not to like insult anybody's belief or your denomination of Christianity if you are a Christian. It's just like a historical record and tracing these events. Okay. I'm not like here to insult your beliefs. Right. But basically Martin Luther's Reformation movement did call for a new way for man to see the world. And this is by use of more individual reason and a desire for a new world order, which would be propelled by naturalism, rationalism, and universal brotherhood. And this was in direct protest to the old world order, which is basically Catholic monarchies, essentially, or monarchies in general, right? Was kingdoms, tyrants, well, in some people's view, tyrants, right? So that's where we get the term Protestant from. It's because it was in protest of the Catholic Church. After the Protestant Reformation, there was a spiritual vacuum left in Europe, and Freemasonry began to fill that void and organize a new universal church to unite man under these values and subvert the current Catholic old world order and replace it with its new world order, which is basically led by Rosicrucianism and Freemasonry, teaching an enlightened position that all religions are allegorical and equal. A core belief of this is also to deny the unique incarnation of God into man through Jesus Christ, and also rejecting the idea of sin and Christ's death being necessary for human salvation. There is no belief in the old world order in these traditions, and no belief in the sacraments of the church as necessary. They believe that human nature alone is sufficient for humanity's happiness in their view. And these New World values allowed for the Protestant view of Christianity to thrive. So it's not really surprising to see a correlation between where Freemasonry tends to thrive is also places where Protestantism tends to thrive too. So this show, like examples of this would be European centers where Protestantism was already well rooted, like Scotland, we had Presbyterianism, England was Anglicanism, Germany, Lutheran, etc. Similarly, Freemasonry caught on largely also in the southern United States, where there happens to be, the Bible Belt umbrella of Protestant Christian denominations. So seems to go a little bit hand in hand with like this idea that you can interpret the word for yourself, go by sola scriptura, scripture alone, and then also like these naturalistic values, not so much the traditions and relying on an outside authority, right?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes too, when I thought it was interesting when I heard that term like New World Order versus Old World Order, like as conspiracy theorists, we love to talk about, warning about the New World Order agenda, trying to prevent that from coming to fruition. But then it's like, do we understand what the old world order was? Like, was that better? Is that what people would like to go back to? If you're not for the New World Order, what's the old world order then? Especially like the Tartaria lovers, you would love to be like, I just wanted to go back to like this classical time and all the beautiful architecture. Well, bro, that was under Catholic monarchy, a lot of it.
Right. It's true. Like what old world order are you thinking is an ideal, Right?
It's interesting.
What is it? Which one do you choose? Medieval, where everybody died at 31 or whatever?
Right? Where we were like taken by the bowels and like, quartered in the town square.
Like old Italian towns would be divided into like 44 factions, and they'd be building towers and chucking spears at each other and just the most violent stuff.
Right? Like a lot of our politicians, we just go and like get them with pitchforks and burn them at the stake right now. Like maybe we should be doing that. I don't know.
They're about to get it here in California. I got to tell you that. There's no question.
Well,
people are angry.
Literally just shove them outside into the fire, right?
If there's one out there ready, I guess it could be. I don't know. Some of these people aren't going to be able to walk in the streets here, but yeah, I mean, it is interesting, like the kind of growth of Freemasonry and Protestantism. There really is a tie there, or different ideas like Illuminism. Maybe that's not Freemasonry, but definitely around in the 17th century. Ingolstadt, which is, even though he's an ex-Jesuit priest, Weishaupt is doing something like totally liberal, non-church ideas, right? Non-sanctioned Catholic traditional churches, church stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And then just to continue on, when historically, when Freemasonry kind of more formally organized about 200 years later, so in 1717, the Catholic Church basically became their enemy number one. Organized religion was rejected largely in favor of the idea that all religions are equally attempting to understand the great architect of the universe, as they call it.
Right.
Which
That's totally occult. That's totally occult stuff.
Right. And as we know from Albert Pike's own writings in Morals and Dogma, which is a famous book that he wrote, he does refer to that great architect as Lucifer himself in his own writing. So, that's right. Yeah. And basically, in the eyes of the Freemason, all religions are equally true and therefore equally false at the same time. And they're all basically human attempts to try and understand God, which I can kind of see. Just like it is a very theosophical idea, right? Yeah. And yeah, according to this view, the way to acquire divine knowledge is reason, not faith or the traditional elements of Catholicism like baptism or the Eucharist, liturgy, or the priesthood. Humanity just needs more reason. And I think we're seeing this in like the modern day, especially when like now the cult of science is leading the way, reason through the United Nations, World Economic Forum, etc. This is all a consequence of Martin Luther's assertion that religious authority is from scripture alone, sola scriptura, and not derived by the more mystical elements of faith. And this opened the door wide for individual reasoning and essentially moral relativism to increase throughout the centuries to come. And this is also why the Catholic Church began to excommunicate Catholics who joined Freemasonry, because essentially it is a religion of all religions and therefore it does not correlate with the Catholic beliefs if you're, truly practicing your faith as you claim. What was I going to say there? Sorry, lost my spot for a second. Oh yeah, while Freemasonry is a secret society of sorts, it's not so secret about its pursuit of the New World Order in the name of equality. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I think too, people would be shocked at like how different the popes are now in like the modern day versus like even 200 years ago. So when all this thought was going on in the 1800s, there are papal documents and canon church law now making room for clerical marriage, divorce and remarriage, liberty of conscience over objective moral law, political rebellion, and separation of church and state. In the past, church and state was together. Was never a separate concept. That's a very modern thing, right?
Right. That's an American thing, right? Like
it is very
the
American.
Pope was the state. Yeah, the Pope was.
That's right. That's the founding of the country is basically in protest of that.
Protest, yeah.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, basically from the time of its writing to now, the instructions outlined in the Alta Vendita have indeed taken deep roots within the Catholic Church and society at large, I think.
It's changed. I mean, I think that the faith versus reason thing is why so many people in our modern age do not have Christian faith. They do not believe in it because it's not reasonable to them. So they've been inured to the concept of reason over mystery and faith, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't make sense to them. So it's like, why am I going to do this?
It's interesting too, though, because I think there is something in the heart of a human in general that has like a hole for God. And even though they reject through reason, then you see the rise in other forms of mysticism. Like there always is this other searching happening for God, right? So instead of filling it with the traditional view of Christianity, you just found a replacement. Yeah, exactly. And that's why we see the rise in secret societies, occultism, witchcraft, right? Like it's interesting.
Right. They're all very religious. That's why when somebody says I'm not religious, I'm like, I bet you're religious in one way or another.
I bet you are.
Even if you don't even go to Masonry, I bet you might get up every day and have your little economic consumerist rituals, going to get coffee or eating an In-N-Out burger every week or something like that. So people deceive themselves into thinking they're not religious.
Totally. Or like, we've just replaced these rituals with other rituals. Right.
Or watching
addiction.
It could be addiction, watching football every Sunday. I know people who take the Sunday off. They don't go to church, they watch NFL. That's their religion. So I mean, there's definitely, like you said, there's a hole. People fill that hole. I would say the faith hole is the best way to kind of fill that. Or something going into church, or at least going to Catholic church is probably better than spending time watching football. Giving those people your time and effort, I would say.
Probably, I would say. And just to continue our like brief historical rundown. Do you want to take this part, Nick?
Where were you left? The Freemasons and Socialists?
Yeah.
Freemasons and Socialists persecuted Christianity intensely in the early 20th century, especially in countries like Mexico, Spain, and Russia. Not only that, but beginning in the 1930s, the Russians began secretly infiltrating the Catholic seminaries to put their own men with communist ideals into the priesthood, who would go on to become bishops, cardinals, and even popes someday, exactly as outlined in the Alta Vendita by the Carbonari Freemasons so many years earlier, to secure a pope according to our heart. Bella Dodd, a former communist agent and later a Catholic convert, testified before the U.S. House Committee on Un-American Activities Committee in 1953 about the ways that communists would infiltrate American institutions, including giving details about a Russian order that used the exact method of planting Communist Party members into seminaries and how do you say that one?
Diocesan, maybe?
Yeah,
diocese. The diocese is kind of like a separate kind of aggregation of Catholic churches.
Yes.
She
Mhm.
testified that in the 1930s, 1,100 men were put into priesthood purposely to destroy the church from within, and that right now they are in the highest places in the church.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah. So that was in 1953 that she gave that testimony, right? And it's just like there's historical proof that this happened, and it's not talked about, I think, that much, right? And I don't think that's a coincidence that then she's saying this in 1953 that there's communists literally in the highest levels of the priesthood in the 50s, and then you have Vatican II happening in the 60s, like right after that. So it's like they stacked the deck, and then called for all this reform with members of their ideology.
Right. I think.
So
Have
yeah,
you guys heard of Malachi Martin?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, Malachi Martin wrote a book on that. They thought he was crazy. He said
I,
that the Soviets are infiltrating the Catholic Church, and
no,
I think it was called a windswept house or something like that.
yeah, he was
And
100%
he was
right.
right. I think he turned out to be right.
He was
Yeah.
right. And also, there's Saint Maximilian Kolbe, who died in the Second World War. He was saying the same thing.
Interesting.
Yeah. And actually, specifically against Freemasonry as well.
Malachi Martin is an interesting show in himself because he encapsulates so many ideas, modern ideas about the Catholic Church: demon possession, exorcism, Soviet infiltration, Masonry, protection of the Pope. Really interesting guy, really well read. I forgot what it. I think he was either a Jesuit. I think he was a Jesuit. Yeah,
I think so, actually. Yeah,
Irish
that's
born.
right. Yeah. So if people don't know what Vatican II is, I think most people might be vaguely familiar, but basically Vatican II was like a reform of the Catholic Church. And it marked a time of big changes, basically taking away a lot of the supernatural elements of the faith, moving from faith in Jesus Christ to faith in man, less about Christ's kingship and more about faith in humanity alone. So sort of implementing those Freemasonic ideals. And it also was the debut of the Novus Ordo Mass. So the New Order Mass. I don't think it's a
I didn't know that.
coincidence that it's called that. Yeah, so formerly the Mass was all in Latin prior to Vatican II. So it was a universal church language that everyone had to know, at least for the mass parts. I mean, you didn't have to be fluent in Latin by any means, but you'd be familiar with it to participate in mass. And then Novus Ordo Mass, there's some things changed, especially regarding the Eucharist, and it's in your own native language. So like in America and Canada, it's in English. In Africa, it would be in whatever Swahili or whatever language you speak there, right? So it's an interesting shift.
It would cause a huge schism within the church. There are guys still
Huge.
railing
Yeah.
about Vatican II today.
Well, I can kind of see why. I mean, growing up, I didn't understand what is the big deal. I didn't even know it existed till I asked my parents why my dad's parents don't go to church anymore. And it was because they stopped going when those changes were made, and it's sort of like a form of protest. Yeah.
They had the guy was on Joe Rogan. What was Mad Max's name again? It's he's a really traditional Catholic, but I think his family left the Catholic, or like he kind of schismed out of the Catholic Church and state tradition. Mel Gibson.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because of that, Vatican II, they thought it was like a real disgrace. So he had to.
Yeah.
He set his own church up in Malibu or something like that.
Did he really?
His own Catholic.
Oh,
church,
wow.
so that he could be traditional, true trad Catholic.
Well, that's why you get this term rad trad Catholic, radical traditional. It means that they honor the traditions of like Vatican I. Prior.
I'm on a guy's show, Gajewski. I don't know if you should listen to him. He's a cool guy, but he goes by Trad Cat Knight.
Oh,
so
I know who he is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's been on there. He's a cool guy. I really admire him. You don't think the same, but he's willing to like look into stuff like Satanism and occultism.
Well, the thing is, a lot of the traditional Catholics are more conspiratorial minded, actually, because they understand like this was an infiltration, this was a conspiracy against the church itself. It's interesting, but then
I'll set you guys up with Gajewski. You probably get a kick.
Yeah, for sure.
Talking with him, he's smart. Yeah.
That would be cool. So Bella Dodd, who Nick referred to before, the woman who testified at that U.S. committee, she said that it wasn't just the priesthood that communists were infiltrating, also public school system as teachers. So this perfectly echoes the agenda set in the Alta Vendita document to, influence the youth. was with any ideology. That's what they do. They go to the youth. Hitler did the same thing. Communists in Russia did the same thing. And yeah, this revolutionized the church from within, from Vatican II and beyond. The cardinals who were a part of the St. Gallen Mafia itself would have been children or teenagers at this time when the communists were aggressively infiltrating the seminaries. So they themselves were growing up in a radically changing time, and they would have been inundated with this like new ideology, basically. Another communist agent, his name is Manning Johnson. He testified at the same U.S. House Committee in 1953 as Bella Dodd. He said that the policy of infiltrating the seminaries was it was successful beyond even the communist expectations. So it was like wildly successful. Bella Dodd herself also admitted that at least 4 of their priests who were, sent to infiltrate had attained the level of cardinal. So that's pretty influential. Incredible. Yeah. Wow. And then like fast forward to 1995, 1996, where we have the St. Gallen Mafia coming together to conspire. They were hoping to succeed Pope John Paul II with their own man, of course. And yeah, they were trying to put those ideas forth from the Alta Vendita. And we do know of their actual existence from their own writings, thanks to a man who's part of it. Cardinal de Niels is his name, from Belgium. And he is a cardinal who's publicly supported abortion and same-sex marriage. De Niels' own biographers wrote that the election of Jorge Bergoglio was prepared by the St. Gallen Mafia beyond a doubt.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did we mention before that we did mention that they met in the city of Saint, it's actually Sankt, right? Gallen?
Yeah, Sankt Gallen.
I think you mentioned it right at the beginning. You mentioned the name of the city. That's how they got their name, right? So
yes. Yeah. All right. So basically, yeah. So you had now we have a bunch of these high-ranking church people, gathering there, who oppose Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger's papacy. And most of these, many of the cardinals who were meeting there were part of the St. Gallen Mafia, can be traced back to being consecrated by one particular priest who was also a confirmed Freemason, and that was Cardinal Mariano Rampolla del Tindaro. And have you ever heard of him, Ramsey?
I have not.
Neither have I.
But
I didn't until this research. Yeah.
I'm interested in this stuff because it just shows like the machinations and the battles between, I don't know, simply put, right and left stuff within, so many political organizations are we squabbling and
absolutely
fighting for control in their ideology and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, he was Rampolla was Secretary of State under Pope Pius XIII, and that was the one who had the visions of Satan approaching the God of Throne. As Secretary of State, Cardinal Rampolla supported the Austrian Christian Social Party. The Christian Social Party was the first Catholic social movement that was both anti-liberal and anti-Semitic. Maybe that's possibly Nazi ideology. I don't know.
The Catholics were very sympathetic to the Nazis.
Yeah. Well, also have been scared. I mean, I don't know. I'm saying that's a reason to cow down to the guy, but I could see some people that were just like, "Oh yeah, he's okay." Like what do you want to say something and then get killed?
Well, this is true as well. But I think that there was the Axis powers was Italy at that time, and Mussolini. So I think that there was kind of like a similar kind of fascist.
Yeah, that is true.
Fascistic outlook at that time.
A tendency to that ideology in their own country. Yeah, exactly.
You know what's even interesting too? Like some of the stuff that we covered when it came to, I feel like Italy kind of like was being the sneak thieves with the occult architecture more out in the open than Germany was. But nobody seems to pay attention to what Italy was doing in World War II.
Interesting. Well, I think St. Peter's, that central sundial, is really occult, and I don't know how they snuck it in there. But there's other occult architecture throughout Rome and stuff like that. But
like Italy went into Ethiopia when at the time the guy who was in charge of Ethiopia thought he was direct bloodline from Solomon.
Right.
They went and took the line of Judah, which Crowley ripped off, and and an obelisk.
Right.
You
that
don't really
obelisk.
ever hear anybody talking about that, but they went in there and took occult architecture.
That obelisk
Right.
in the center of St. Peter's is actually an obelisk that was taken from Egypt by none other than what's his name? The guy Little Boot. What's the Roman
Oh.
Empire? Roman Emperor. The
Mm.
Catholic Church kind of took it over, but it was
Is that
not
that's not
Nero, the guy after Nero.
Caligula?
Caligula, yeah, it's from Caligula.
Mm,
Caligula brought it over for some other reason, but
yeah.
Oh,
it has an interesting history in itself. But yeah, it's really incredible. Like a lot of this history and a lot of this this kind of right left fighting within the Catholic Church for authority. I mean, isn't Bergoglio kind of seen as kind of more sympathetic than maybe people thought he was? They thought he was really conservative, and then kind of made some different things. Like,
Yeah. Well, basically, like Pope Francis's papacy so far has been like an item list from the St. Gallen Mafia. Like the reforms he's trying to make, it's like literally like check, check, check. So yeah. Nick, I think you have a bit more on this Cardinal Rampolla, right?
Yeah, he did. He fought new penal codes that aimed to criminalize clerical activity. He had a strong association with French Freemasonry. He went on to consecrate bishops and cardinals, and maybe they were also aligned with maybe some of his ideology. Who knows? And in his lineage, what is that, episcopal lineage?
Episcopal.
Episcopal.
It's okay.
And he can be traced directly to Pope Francis, as well as many of the cardinals who make up the St. Gallen Mafia. Many of the cardinals and archbishops associated with his lineage were the ones who were running the Vatican route lines, evacuating Nazis from Italy into Argentina and other South American countries, where Bergoglio and Pope Francis is from.
Yeah, he's from Argentina.
Yeah,
is this kind of centerpiece of all that stuff. Yeah.
Another cardinal in that lineage was Cardinal Sebastian Baggio. And according to Father Charles Murr, he said, all those bishops and cardinals who formed the St. Gallen group were named by Cardinal Sebastian Baggio. And he was saying that, referring to one of the cardinals who in 1974 was accused by two other cardinals of being a Freemason. Charles Murr was a close friend of Cardinal Edward Gagnon, who had been tasked by the Pope to investigate the problem of Freemasonry within the Vatican hierarchy and was privy to some of these internal findings and debates. He describes in the book how in 1974, two cardinals, Dino Staffa and Silvio Adi, presented Pope Paul VI with documentation about two Vatican prelates. One of them was Cardinal Sebastiano Baggio, who was accused by Odi and Staffa with proof in hand for being active Freemasons. Cardinal Baggio was perfect of this. He was perfect of the Sacred Congregation for Bishops from 1973 until 1984, and as such had great influence over which clergymen were chosen as bishops and often subsequently cardinals. There at the St. Gallen group, members who were appointed bishops when Cardinal Sebastian Baggio, known Freemason, was active. And the list of the St. Gallen group can be found on Wikipedia. And here are listed those bishops who were picked during the time of Cardinal Baggio. That would be Cardinal Carlo Martini, 1980, Cardinal Ted McCarrick, 1977, Cardinal Godfrey Daniels, 1977, Cardinal Carl Lehman, 1983, Cardinal Achilles Silvestrini, 1979, Cardinal Murphy O'Connor, 77, Bishop Huzar, 77, and Cardinal Joseph Policarpo, 78. If I do remember correctly, wasn't there Teresa, was there somebody who's recently came out? Well, not recently, probably about 5 or 6 years ago, actually came out and said like one of these people actually like kind of was like messing with them.
Yeah, so probably the one you're thinking of is Cardinal Ted McCarrick.
Yeah.
He was like, people might know his name from being like really in the headlines with the clergy abuse scandals. He's like a prolific like abuser. So he was part of the St. Gallen Mafia.
What was his name again?
Cardinal Ted McCarrick,
McCarrick. Yeah, I've heard that name.
McCarrick. Yeah, he's like a prolific abuser. And he's part of this influential group, which is pretty
Right. So St. Gallen is northeastern Switzerland, so it's up in the northeastern section.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm.
In the 1970s, various members of the St. Gallen Mafia sprang into action and focused specifically on subverting priestly celibacy and the prohibition against communion for the divorced and civilly remarried. Later after, the Mafia began meeting around 1996. Martini gave a 1999 dream speech in which he listed a number of doctrinal and disciplinal knots that needed to be addressed. He spoke in somewhat coded terms, but he was referring to issues such as the ordination of married men, communion for the divorced and civilly remarried, synodality, and so on. During the pontificate of Benedict XVI, the Mafia led a multi-pronged war. Specifically, Martini kept alive the dream of another council or series of synods. Casper clung to the hope of opening up communion to divorced and civilly remarried, and Daniels pushed for exemptions to the ban on condoms. But their agenda, only went so far. Their efforts at the 2005 that's yours. Sorry.
It's okay. No worries. Yeah, no, it's just interesting. I wanted to make a note about the term synod, SYNOD. So I never heard that word till maybe a few years ago. So with this Cardinal Carlo Martini calling for synods, it's basically like a meeting of Christians to discuss reform within their community. And it would influence like change from the community upwards, as opposed to the papacy, which should be like from the top down, right? Influencing change. So it's more like, the community, what people want, the church should like, change with the world, that sort of thing, as opposed to the world changing around the church. And in the last few years, I think since 2021, there's been the synod on synodality happening in Rome. So it's like, how much more of a synod do you want? It's the synod on synodality. And it like just finished. I think it was for like 4 years. Pretty crazy. So a lot of changes were like discussed during this time. I think, what was I going to say here?
And some people, they in the U.S., that's so Byzantine. There's so many different religious groups and everything. But in other countries, it's the Catholic Church. It's all you get. And there's barely any kind of Protestant or evangelicals in Mexico. They used to kill them. Really, the 20th century it happened, like competitors against the Catholic Church. So we may not see the kind of potency and power. But I talked to a guy in Argentina where, Bergoglio's from, and it's like Opus Dei, which is another secret society. Yes. And all these guys are involved in all kinds of very traditional Catholic stuff all the way to the top. It's a part and parcel of like power of the exercise of power in Argentina and other Catholic countries. So it's just something to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. So the reforms that Nick mentioned about, communion, divorce, ordination of married men, also a larger role for women in the church, which I'm not saying is necessarily a bad thing. Just it's interesting that these ideas are traditionally like not up for discussion, really. Another thing too is influence of acceptance of other people. So in the church, like the LGBTQ agenda and whatnot, Pope Francis basically has like tackled the reforms on the St. Gallen Mafia's list and like implemented them like one after the other. And essentially reinforcing the ideals of the Freemasonic Alta Vendita, the destruction of the perennial teachings of the church and increased liberalism of the church. The idea that the church needs to update its dogmas, change with the times, and surrender to modernism and the world. One example of that is, of course, the controversy in Pope Francis's papacy around the Latin Mass. He's tried to like quell the Latin Mass and essentially like force priests to stop practicing it, which is strange because it's like, well, why would you want to do that? Like, I know
That's
it's
like the core of the Catholic Church is it's kind of like centralized power from Rome, right?
it is, yeah.
It's,
Well,
the,
and
it's where St. Peter, went and was beheaded, supposedly, right?
yeah, essentially, like, Pope Francis is discouraging the Latin Mass from being practiced. So that's the like pre-Vatican II version of the Mass and the celebration of the Eucharist. He only wants like the Novus Ordo Mass done. And that also leaves room for changing how the host is consecrated, the Eucharist. So it's like, is it really now like the body of Christ anymore? Because you're changing some of the wording, how the ritual is done. It's interesting to think about. And it's like, why are you harping so much on that Mass? Is there something special about it being said in Latin? Is there something special about the rituals that like we as the lay people don't know about? That like the clergy knows like something is more powerful about the Latin Mass? I've even heard some people like convert because they attended Latin Mass, like Shia LaBeouf, the actor. He's somebody who played Padre Pio in a movie, and he was attending Latin Mass as staying with the Capuchin friar monks, which Padre Pio was one of. He stayed with them for research for his role, and he ended up converting to Catholicism because he was so touched by his experience. And he said a big part of it was attending the Latin Mass. And I'm like, that's interesting. I think I've never attended one myself, but from what I gather in like things that I've seen written about it in videos, it seems that it's much more mystical. And I think part of that is because it's not in a language that you like fully understand, or there is something about those old languages like Latin, Hebrew, that is much more reverent.
I mean, here's something
I would
interesting.
agree with that.
And interesting about this too is that when and I'm not even making this up, when I left the OTO around that time, there was a few other people who did as well, for all multiple reasons. And some of them I know, well, unless they were making it up, which I don't know why they would all lie, and they were all going to different ones. They left there and started going to Latin masses.
Interesting.
That.
And he Crowley based like that whole thing on
Russian Orthodox.
Orthodox. So that's also very ritualized, and
Yes.
So I think so. And you talk about the need hole for God or whatever. People like ritual too. They like and if you look at the Last Supper, it's very ritualized. It's very important. Yeah. Like, you are my friends, do this.
Yeah, that's the words we say, the priest says at the consecration, and the group responds in a whole ritual. Like, it's always the same. And yeah, that Cardinal Martini, who was part of the St. Gallen Mafia, he has, of course, broken with the Vatican on a number of issues, one of them being the Latin Mass. He said that he loves the Latin language for prayer and would have no trouble doing a Mass in Latin, but he won't. He refuses. He says, I will not do it. And it's like, well, why are you refusing? Like, you're a cardinal. Like, shouldn't you have reverence for this way of like celebrating the Eucharist? Why is there such a...
Isn't there options within Catholic churches or dioceses where people can get the Mass in English and also Latin? Because I thought I remember seeing that fairly recent, where like you have everything's English, and then 5 o'clock Latin Mass.
Yeah. So if you do have a church like that near you, that's a great option. A lot of churches, at least in my experience, I'm in Canada, but there's not very many. Like, Novus Ordo Mass in your native language is the predominant way that it's done. But I think we are seeing a movement by a lot of even younger Catholics searching for that reverence and that ritual, that are seeking out the Latin Mass and demanding it, actually, which is interesting because the Vatican apparently wants to quell it totally. Yeah. So I don't know. It's interesting.
Did I go now, right?
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah, so out of like these people that were listed as being part of the St. Gallen Mafia, I think I had a list of 11. I'm sure there's more than that, but out of that list, I did run I ran their names just looking for stuff online. Anything came up besides this stuff, and I think you had him up before. You might Ivo Fura right there. You have him up there. Him. He was the bishop of St. Gallen from 1995 to 2005 and hosted the initiator. There was news reports of him connected to St. Gallen Mafia of covering up sexual abuse. Do The University of Zurich researchers' findings accuse Bishop Ivo Führer of allowing a priest to remain in ministry despite numerous reports of sexual harassment. Basically, yeah, this guy was known for like kissing and groping and just, being a weird creep. And I think, he basically just didn't say anything. And he was supposedly proof.
That was Ratzinger's job before he became Pope. He was kind of like the head guy, kind of quelling a lot of the stuff. And the number 3 guy in the Catholic Church, they got him off on some sexual abuse stuff. The guy from Australia, I forgot his name.
Oh, really?
So, some of these, they're big wigs in the Catholic Church have been accused.
Seems to be a theme with this group in particular, too.
Yeah. Then you have Godfrey Daniels, and there was Belgian sex tape abuse tapes amplify Catholic scandals. That's like the news, top of the news thing. Leaked tapes of Belgium Cardinal Godfrey Daniels urging a victim not to reveal he was sexually abused by a bishop are some of the most damaging documents to emerge in the scandal rocking the Roman Catholic Church.
Right. There's Godfrey Daniels. They're right there.
Oh,
nice. The tapes made secretly by the victim and published in 2 Belgian newspapers on Saturday show the former exhorting him to accept a private apology or wait 1 year until the bishop retired before making his case public.
What the heck?
I mean, that's so obvious that it's like, now you, jeez. Yeah, now you have Ad van Leeuwen. He was head of the Salesian order.
Salesian. Yes.
Order from 1975 to 1981. The bishop was aware of several concrete cases and had to take action, the spokesman said. This is the first time the bishop had admitted knowing about the abuse. He declined to make any further comment pending the outcome of an independent inquiry into abuse at Catholic schools and seminaries worldwide. But he was another one that had supposedly known of stuff and really didn't say anything. Then you have Cormac Murphy O'Connor. He admits shame over the 1980s sex abuse case. He basically said that he knew that there was Cardinal Murphy O'Connor told the festival crowd how, as the Bishop of Arundel and Brighton, he allowed priest Michael Hill to become a chaplain of Gatwick Airport, despite Hill confessing to him that he had abused young boys.
What the heck?
And because of that, allowing him to do that, he did eventually end up abusing a boy later on.
There's a lot of that. I mean, if you watch that movie Spotlight, that was part of all of the arrangements, is that people got paid off and then were told to shut up.
Yes, that's right.
They didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
And then they moved people around too. It was pretty dark. That's what Ratzinger was involved. I mean, that's allegedly what Ratzinger was involved in. Is handling the cases and then moving, instead of prosecuting the priest, they would move him to another diocese and they keep going. It's crazy.
Yeah, it seems to be a theme with that. I mean, I'm sure this happened in the past as well, but it seems to be a strong theme with that generation of seminarians and priests, right? And maybe that there is a correlation there with the infiltration of the communist and Freemasonic values. Right. I'm not saying, all communists and Freemasons are sex abusers by any means, but maybe there's something there, right? It's a strong
part of communist and doctrine, if you're true, is you're supposed to kind of break down the traditional family and break down all these things that are supposedly, keeping the revolution going, like traditional families and all that stuff. So traditional moral values are thrown out the window. It is anti-Christian and anti-tradition. There's no question communism is.
Yeah, there is also evidence that a lot of even homosexual men were put into the seminaries purposely as well. So that's another.
Not a surprise.
One thing I even want to add too, I didn't include them just because it was time or whatever, and it wasn't that important. But there was at least 3, if not 4, other people on that list that when I looked for this type of stuff, it was going on at a place that they were at, but they were admitting it and investigating it. So now, all right, now they're not being known as covering it up, but what's the odds of 6 or 7 of these dudes being at places that have this going on?
You're right.
I mean, is it that horribly? Is that horrific, all over the place, or is there something here with these people?
Right.
And contrary to probably most people, I don't think it's as bad. to where it's that prevalent. I do think it might actually be something with these people.
Yeah. Or is it too that they were covering it up and hushing it because they were also involved? You know, like it makes you wonder, like, why are you
Yeah, something like
not?
that. Yeah.
Yeah, right. I just have a bit of info on like St. Gallen itself and like why that place, and then I think we're pretty much like gonna wrap up after that. So, just in the interest of time, but so why did the St. Gallen Mafia pick the Swiss town of St. Gallen to meet in the first place? And I think part of the reason might be because the city does have deep European communist roots. Originally, it was the base of an Irish missionary named Saint Gallus in 612 AD, and then a monastery was established there in 720 AD. However, in the beginning of the 20th century, the region became associated with satanic rituals and communism. So that may have something to do with it. Marxist leader Vladimir Lenin himself did use Switzerland as his headquarters during his exile, which was around 1903 to 1917. Lenin, of course, inspired the Bolshevik Revolution by having his writings printed in Switzerland and smuggled into Russia. One person who organized Lenin's return to Russia was a Swiss named Fritz Platen, who was a Freemason, a communist, and a native of St. Gallen, the town itself. The rise of the Bolshevik Revolution was actually prophesied in another Marian apparition. So I mentioned that Our Lady of La Salette in the beginning of the show. And this time in 1917, Our Lady of Fatima, that's a very famous one in Portugal, said, Russia will spread her airs throughout the world, causing wars and persecutions of the church. The good will be martyred, the Holy Father will have much to suffer, and various nations will be annihilated. And she was referring to World War I when she said Russia will spread her airs. And in 1917, of course, we had the Bolshevik Revolution and World War I explode across Europe. And nations were, in fact, annihilated. Fritz Platen, the Swiss St. Gallen man who helped Lenin, he also founded a publication called the Communist International as a way to encourage the rise of communism worldwide. And he is a major reason why St. Gallen became a hotbed of communism in Switzerland and, of course, in Europe. There's another gentleman, Hermann Joseph Metzger. He was head of the OTO, the Ordo Templi Orientis, in Switzerland, and he was born in 1919. So that's another connection there. It's interesting. Also, infamous occultist Aleister Crowley, which you're all familiar with. He had a connection to St. Gallen. So apparently he was an enthusiastic mountaineer and spent a lot of time in Switzerland due to its mountainous region. But under the leadership of Crowley, the OTO did develop from European Freemasonry into the practice of Thelema. And that, unlike explicit Freemasonry, the OTO includes a liturgical church known as the Gnostic Catholic Church, whose aim is to restore Christianity to its original status as a solar-centric religion. The oldest OTO lodge is in Switzerland, and Gnostic masses were practiced in the St. Gallen diocese. That gentleman I referred to before, Hermann Joseph Metzger, he did become patriarch of the Gnostic Catholic Church in 1960, and he would wear the white cassock and zucchetto hat, just like the Catholic Pope does. He was supposedly also head of his order of the Illuminati and head of his Rosicrucian order as well. Metzger and the Swiss OTO claim to have received incense, wine, and Eucharistic hosts directly from the Bishop of St. Gallen, whose name was Joseph Hasler, in the 1960s. So, like, receiving the Eucharistic host is a big, like, sacrilege, like, outside of the church. Like, the priest should know not to be giving that out because it is considered the actual body of Christ once it's consecrated. So that is really interesting. Unless he's giving unconsecrated ones to be used in the Gnostic Mass, which still for a Catholic priest to do is a weird flex, as the kids say. Sus.
Yes, sus flex. Good.
Right?
Good.
Weird flex, bro.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
It's a good one.
Yes.
My favorite is the Skibbity
Riz.
Yeah, Skibbity Riz. What the heck? I've spent hours trying to
I heard
figure
that.
out.
I was like, what?
Skibbity is like almost, it's Skibbity. Skibbity is like a reference to a meme but it's kind of like sketchy and weird. That's what it means.
Skippity toilet is the original meme. Yeah, I have 2 kids that age that use all these terms, so I'm well versed.
Pretty totes cray cray, right? Like
totes my goats.
Yeah. I use it back at them just to piss them off. That's what I do.
Oh yeah, it's so funny, honestly. It really is.
You use their terminology.
Absolutely.
We're at the hour mark. Is there anything that you like to add before we wrap it up?
I think the stuff that I had, this blue stuff here left for me, I think we could skip that. So, I mean, if there's anything after that, I think.
I guess, I think we showed a pretty strong connection between the original Alta Vendita to the St. Gallen Mafia, and then those values like being, passed down into the church in the modern day. There's actually been really recent news stories like this week from like, popular news outlets. One of them was actually yesterday. Pope Francis just appointed a woman as a Vatican prefect.
Wow.
That's new. So again, making women in a higher position in the church. He also appointed Cardinal McElroy as Archbishop of Washington, D.C. So Washington, D.C. is the former diocese of Ted McCarrick, who was the prolific abuser that we mentioned, who was a member of the St. Gallen Mafia. McElroy was instrumental in covering up McCarrick's crimes.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. And also other abuses in the clergy, such as the case of this woman named Rachel Mastrogiacomo. Her story is wild. I had no idea, and I just dove into it because of like the headline that just came out about McElroy, and I'm like, what is going on? But yeah,
this is the title you just mentioned. Trump critic to be Archbishop of Washington and appoints first female leader of the Vatican department.
Like, we're seeing this play out in real time, even in my own kids' school. So my kids attend a publicly funded Catholic school here in Toronto. And there's so much push, like, for the LGBTQ agenda and, like, really, like, downplaying the faith in the school. Like, nothing, they don't learn anything about religion. I learned a little bit in my day. My kids learned, like, nothing. Now, also the sacraments, if you, like, want to make your first communion and stuff, that's a reason, like, why I sent them to Catholic school, so they can learn that in school. Now, they don't even learn it in school. We have to take them to the church to learn it. It's like they don't even include it in the curriculum at all. And then even during June, during Pride Month, they'll fly the Pride flag on the school flagpole.
Wow.
And it's like, I'm not homophobic whatsoever. But at the same time, it's like, why can't we just have the Canadian flag as the only flag on the flagpole?
No, it's Luciferianism. That's what it is. It's a triumph over Christianity.
Yeah.
Any church that flies that flag.
It's symbolic for sure. And I even called the Archdiocese of Toronto asking, like, why is this happening? After years of putting up with it, I was like, you know what? I want an answer. I called. They couldn't. No good answer is given. Like, there's no direct answer given. And I'm thinking, okay, now I understand why, because these directives and these ideologies have been passed down from the Vatican for decades, centuries even, perhaps. And it's from the top down. And there's not a whole lot you can do about it except talk about these things amongst your own family and friends, really.
Yeah. And I do think just to like reiterate before about like showing how there's connections and how like, the Cardinals going one lineage. I mean, there is like solid proof of Freemasonry, ones being in Freemasons. And like, to me, it's like very weird. It's like between two of them, you can actually see how this is all happening. Like one does one and that goes down the line, and then that one creates a whole bunch of them.
Yeah.
It's you have to go through a little bit, and you can actually find this stuff online and look at the lineages. You may have to go through a little bit if you actually want to take the time and look, but like you will actually see how like what we're saying, and like it does make sense. Where it's like that just looks like it was pre-planned.
Right. Stacking the deck with their homies.
Yeah, crazy, amazing. Where can people find your stuff? You want to talk about Occult Rejects, Nick and Teresa?
Yeah, the Occult Rejects, that's on BitChute, Rumble, and YouTube, and all major podcasts. And we also do have the occultresearchinstitute.org, and that is a bunch of people with a bunch of different types of work. Definitely go check that out. And then Teresa, she has her own show. You can plug that as well if you want.
Yeah, I have the Spiritual Gangsters as well with Nick, and actually on that show we have dived into a couple of the Marian apparitions quite in depth. So if people want to find out more about those, really interesting stuff. And I will just also mention the movie Conclave. I just watched it. This agenda plays out perfectly in that movie, and I actually think it was really well done. So if you're aware of like what's going on, it will be a lot more interesting for you to watch.
It's
So
recent, right? Who's the star?
very recent, end of the year,
Yeah.
2024. It came out. Ray Fiennes
Ray Fiennes is in it.
is
Yeah,
in
it's
it.
gotten
Yeah.
good reviews. I've seen things I didn't. It's interesting we did the show because I didn't see a connection. Now I do. So Conclave,
Now
check
you'll
it out.
see. You'll be like,
Now I
oh, I
will.
see it.
I will.
Yeah. Thank you
Occult
so much.
Rejects. Nick,
Logan.
thank you. Nice talking with you. Thanks so much for your time. Teresa of the Spiritual Gangsters. And we talked about the St. Gallen Mafia. So I'll put links to all the shows. Thank you so much. All right. Let me end this.